Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Soccer Scene in conjunction with Sport in Limerick. We are joined tonight by Southeast Radio's Aidan Delaney, and I suppose due to the Southeast connection, we all know now that he'll be in the Wexford camp for Friday evening's game. You joined us twice last year as well, Aidan. We're delighted to have you back on the show with us ahead of the new season. The anticipation is huge ahead of the clash at Ferrycarrig Park between Wexford and Treaty. Both sides as well have done an awful lot of business. Just judging by, we'll say, social media feeds and maybe pundits and the likes, why do I get the feeling that there's a quiet confidence in Wexford, or maybe even more than a quiet confidence in Wexford, that they can get their first win against Treaty on Friday?
Do you know what? There has been this kind of change, because usually Wexford go into the pre-season and, we finished last for the last couple of years. So there's usually kind of this muted kind of a sense of optimism, really, but nobody's really buying into it until maybe week 3 or 4 when results hopefully start going our way. But this year, yeah, definitely the kind of off-field dealings, the likes of Aaron Dobbs coming in, Conor Barry, Conor Davis, and Dinny Corcoran, that really kind of moves the dial. And even people who wouldn't be that interested in Wexford FC are coming up to me and saying like, "Oh wow, they've really made some nice signings this year, and maybe I might actually head down to Ferrycarrig Park," which is brilliant, and what you want to see more than anything else, So it's definitely quite confidence, I would say. I've been speaking to a couple of the players, and they're definitely looking higher up the table than last. So any position that's above 9th is going to be progress, So I'm just hoping that's where we end up.
Yeah, it's funny. I know you mentioned the same kind of thing to me last year. It was like a bit of deja vu about anything above 9. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for Wexford, as we know. But judging by the signings, you would expect a bounce. I know that I did a table prediction with my podcast analyst, Jason and Noel O'Connor, and we did have Wexford higher. The only thing is I had Wexford only at 7th. Now, some people think Wexford can make a real push for the playoffs. Where would you be on that? Would you be in agreement that maybe just finishing a couple of places, or do you think you're actually capable of jumping, which is very difficult, maybe 4 or 5 places?
Yeah, listen, some of the places that I've seen have us maybe 5th, even as high as 4th, which is, I'm used to being pessimistic down here and kind of, damping down the expectations. So I'm kind of more where you are. I think 7th is kind of a good spot for us. Like, obviously, I want to see Wexford getting into the playoffs and, really having a nice post-season, if you like. But I do think that, there's a lot of teams there, kind of all of a similar level. There's no real kind of standout team, and there's no real whipping boys, I think, this year. So it could really go either way. Winning your games at home is going to be absolutely crucial this year. So that's why it's really important to start off with a win against Treaty this weekend. I would probably be more of the kind of 6th, 7th. I think the playoffs might be a step too far this year. But listen, when you have somebody like Dinny Corcoran, if he can stay injury-free and fit, he's definitely, 15, 16, 17 goals a season, and that'll shoot you right up the table as well. It's just on the defensive side, I think maybe Wexford might need somebody else to come in to maybe just lock that down a little bit more, because there could be an awful lot of 3-3 games or 4-3 games throughout the season, and hopefully we'll come out on the right end of those.
Yeah, I know that Wexford are promoting their programme, and you did have a player focus, I noticed, with Dinny Corcoran, like you said.
Himself,
obviously,
yes.
He's had his troubles, Aidan, with injury. We know that in the last couple of seasons, but we also know that, on his day, he can score a lot of goals at Premier Division level. So never mind First Division level. He did that with Sporting Fingal back in the day as well. But on top of that as well, in the forward line, it's totally revamped. And as you mentioned already, Aaron Dobbs, you also have Conor Davis. I mean, those two players, when they came onto the scene, they were scoring goals, and there was a lot of talk about those players. It probably hasn't worked out for them as well as they would have thought. But maybe that, as much as Dinny Corcoran is a player that you'd love his experience, but maybe the types of Davis and Dobbs who have something to prove effectively and trying to get their careers back on track would be perfect for Wexford.
Absolutely. And listen, we know all about Aaron Dobbs. He's an Enniscorthy man just up the road. He's literally just about 2 minutes from me here. So hopefully he can, be a bit of a hometown hero and start really, really well. Conor Davis is a really interesting one as well. And Conor Barry, who I was speaking to recently on our show, he's definitely somebody who's got that creative spark. And I think it's about finding the players that could complement each other, because we've had Jack Doherty there for years. And, there was times there where Jack Doherty was basically a man on his own, trying to jump for balls with 6-foot defenders, and it just wasn't working out. And I think you saw last year when, especially when Jack Moylan came in and Ian, kind of rejigged the forwards a little bit and played 3 up front. That really worked out well, because they found a combination between Jack and Kyle and and Jack as well. And that really worked out. So obviously Jack and Kyle are gone now. They're on to bigger and better things. Pats have Kyle, and he's should be getting into their cup squad at least. I think he's definitely good enough. And Jack Moylan up with Shells now, and he's definitely a Premier Division footballer. You could tell every time he got on the ball that he was, destined for bigger and better things. So you're just hoping that Ian has, kind of found that magic again, and he's able to get players that will complement each other. Obviously, Ginny is, the man who's going to be up there in front, scoring the goals, but you've definitely got that creative spark. I think Jack is better when he's got those players to play off, maybe play that little bit deeper. And the likes of Connor Davis and Connor Barry, they'll go ahead of him, hopefully get some crosses in, and, we might see a couple of goals for all four of them, really.
Yeah, we had, you mentioned the two departures for Wexford. Treaty also have had, even though they've brought in a few players maybe with experience and promise, they've lost. Obviously, Sean McSweeney to Shelburne. Ty Grime was the big one to Bowes as well. We've Jack Brady now coming in after only playing 10 games in 2 years for Shelburne. He was more so of an understudy after a promising time with Limerick FC. So also Wexford, I suppose, are in a similar boat really, because I know that Corcoran has went to Cork City. He was there for the year, but then you also have a player like in Paul Hunt, who I suppose will be desperate to play games. It's like Jack Brady to a degree, and both of those will be desperate now to play games on a regular basis and get those number one shirts.
Yeah, definitely. I think Corcoran was a bit of a loss. Obviously an Irish under-17, and definitely somebody who has a progression in the game. He had a poor enough start with Wexford, and a lot of that wasn't down to him. A lot of it was, silly decisions at the back, and some of the criminal balls that were played back to him, and he couldn't just deal with those. And especially for a young lad, you can't be giving them those kind of, especially early on in the season. And there was that awful situation. I think it was the UCD game where he was sent off for 20 seconds. Yeah. Like, that's going to knock a lad's confidence. But the one thing that Ian Ryan did was, kind of sit Jimmy down and say, look, you've done this at a bigger level than here. You're definitely capable of passing that on. And you saw every single week he was getting more confident. He was coming out collecting balls. He was collecting crosses. He was, shouting at his defenders. Not easy to do when you've got somebody like Lorcan in front of you, So he was getting better and better.
Most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Lorcan's not afraid to shout back to. But yeah, like Paul Hunt is somebody who's got that experience, and you're kind of going from, a very inexperienced young lad to somebody who's got league experience. And, I was reading an interview with Paul there recently enough, and he was saying, look, Cork City weren't going to give me the games, and I wanted to, he was thinking about going back to Munster Senior League, and at least this is a step up from that. And I think he deserves another chance as well. And like that, if he brings that experience and kind of, because there is a bit of inexperience and a bit of youth there in that Wexford backline, and having somebody with that confidence behind you, and that'll obviously stand to Wexford as well. But Corcoran going to be a bit of a loss, but Paul Hunt not a bad man to bring in.
Yeah, certainly. As I said, we did mention the vast players that Wexford brought in. I know that Noel O'Connor was saying to me he feels that maybe in terms of squad improvement, both of these squads have improved on last season. I know Wexford's probably certainly will, but Treaty have brought in a couple of experienced players in recent weeks. I know Enda Kern has come back from Murview following a spell away. That could work either way, I suppose, but he seems like he's fit and sharp and desperate to make an impression on his return to League of Ireland. That'll provide some competition for Kieran Hanlon. There was, Matt McKevitt was there, but there was very little for Kieran Hanlon last year. The big one, the surprise, I suppose, that might have taken you by surprise and others by surprise, was the sign of Joe Gorman probably at centre back for Treaty. It came out of nowhere. We know the circumstances behind it with the issues with Portadown and tweets from years ago that obviously Joe has said he regrets since. But on the field, though, a really big signing for Treaty, and one that desperately needed because of Anthony O'Donnell not being there this year, and he scored 6 goals last year. So in both boxes, Joe Gorman will add to them.
Absolutely. And I think even more important was, kind of keeping that core squad together. And I think Treaty have done that really well. And listen, when you've got a manager like Tommy Barrett, there are going to be players who want to play with him, and run through brick walls for him as well. So I think the likes of keeping Conor Melody and those kind of players as well, that's been important, I think, for Treaty, because we see such a turnover in League of Ireland, and the PFAI were saying that like 75% of players don't have long-term contracts and won't be re-signing with their clubs and that kind of stuff. So it's so important to keep a core squad, like especially when Treaty are such a new club that if things weren't going well, a lot of players might just say, listen, I can go anywhere I like. But they've managed to keep a core squad there, and I think that's going to be really important for Treacy. And listen, they could fire up the table as well. Brett Hanlon is one of the most interesting players to watch. When he's on his day, he's absolutely unplayable, and I think he's going to do some damage on Friday night as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see actually, because he's had a disrupted pre-season campaign due to a hernia problem, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be available for the start. He played last Friday night, but himself and Enda Curran are bound to push each other hard, I think, this year for the starting position. So it'll be interesting to see does Tommy err on the side of maybe, I suppose, a bit of loyalty to Red Hanlon considering last year, or starting afresh this season.
But even that, like, you could bring him off the bench, against tired defenders. He's going to bully them around. He's definitely an option there. So either way, I think it's going to be a difficult night for the likes of Kevin McAvoy and Paul Cleary.
Yeah, two players who have watched a good bit of. Another player, I suppose, actually, now that you mentioned it about Conor Melody, I suppose maybe there was a tiny bit of maybe even loyalty in some ways from Melody as well, because last season, as we know, he signed for Treaty and he didn't really play at all. Like, he did actually make an impact at the end of the season, scored against UCD in the second leg of the playoff, but maybe there's that sense of the club stuck by me or signed me when I was injured and put maybe faith in me, so he wants to repay that, and he has looked very sharp in pre-season. Dean George is carrying a knock at the moment as well, but he's another player who's effectively like a new signing, really, considering how injury prone he was last year. So I suppose as much as Wexford have improved in attack, Tommy Barrett will be hoping that these players can improve Treaty's attack, which at times, because of Treaty's kind of maybe defensive game plan, was a bit blunt last season. I mean, Kieran Hanlon was the top scorer, 6 goals, but 3 of them were penalties. So he'll probably be looking to add to the mantra of just Treaty being a kind of maybe a set piece scoring team.
Yeah, and listen, we know a bit about Dean George. He was down here for not too long, but it was a decent spell he had down here as well. So I think it's really interesting to see the kind of moves that Treaty have made off the field as well. Listen, a new enough club, but getting the likes of Shane Keegan into your academy was an absolute deal this week as well. Like, I'm very, very jealous because we know all about, he brought us to the Premier Division and winning a First Division title. So Shane has got that European experience. He's got, and if he can bring some players through, I mean, Limerick is more of a rugby town, let's be fair, but there's plenty of talent there. Yeah, that's it. So listen, I think Treaty will be absolutely fine this year. Like that, there was one thing you could kind of count on with Treaty games last year, is that somebody would get sent off and it would almost certainly finish 1-1. So if he can, turn some of those draws into wins, Treaty will go. I would have Treaty up in the playoff spots myself. I think they've just got enough talent there, especially at the Markets Fields, to win their games at home. They won't fear going to the likes of Bishopsgate or the RSC. They're handy enough. They'll shut down defensively. Know they can nick a goal here and there, and I think they'll certainly be fine there too.
I did bet that Treaty would be in the playoffs myself and predict that, but I hate that, yourself, that kind of optimism about your own team. You said it yourself earlier on that it's a bit of an uneasy feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is all right. Yeah, that's the thing about, I think Treaty are they have enough defensive solidity to go to a place like Bishopsgate or out to Eamon DC Park and kind of get a result. That's the one thing I think Wexford are missing at the minute. There's still a player I think needs to come in and maybe sit in front of that back 4 or back 3 as it will be. A player that might just add to that defensive solidity that I think Wexford are missing. Conor Crowley is a very decent deep lying midfielder, and he'll certainly help going forward. But I think you're still missing that kind of destroyer, that kind of tackler that'll kind of break up attacks and then maybe get Wexford in transition, playing off the front foot again. So that's the one thing I think, if Wexford can win most of their home games, and hopefully if we see a big crowd on Friday night, you start to get a bit of momentum, because Wexford will get down and support their lads if they think they're going to win. They haven't had too many opportunities to do that for the last few years, but even the last game against, I think it was Bray, at the last home game of last year, like, there was a decent crowd there, plenty of young children there, and hopefully those guys will all come around. Now I think there might be a bit of a gale on Friday night and it might be not a great day, but I would still encourage people to come down and see how the team gets on, because this is definitely a different Wexford side from the Brian O'Sullivan one and for the last couple of years. So hopefully we might see a decent game and plenty of goals on Friday night.
Yeah, no disrespect. It's not a personal attack or an attack on Wexford, but I can't think of any place worse than Ferrycarrig Park when there's a gale blowing with the motorway behind you and everything. It seems like the worst possible place to be when there's wind coming from all directions. But
the Limerick Oilers had to deal with it there in Wexford Park there 2 weeks ago as well, so they know all about it too.
Yeah, well, look, I thought you might get that dig in. I knew it would come at some stage.
I had to keep it in my back pocket there. All right, yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah, look, we'll see once the big ones come. I suppose it's what the Limerick people are clinging to after last week's loss to Galway as well. But before I move on, I was going to move on maybe to what you said, the point you made maybe about support in Wexford for the soccer team at the moment. But there was one thing we spoke about Shane Keegan coming on our podcast last night. Going to Treaty United, which obviously some people say was very left field. You needed someone with those qualifications as well, and it's been well received. And Limerick, you mentioned you talked really well about what he's done for Wexford and in terms of the promotion. But I was almost surprised, and maybe you were being a bit diplomatic, but I was also surprised that there wasn't a bit of a bitter taste in the mouth considering the circumstances in which he left. I mean, that was so well documented at the time.
Yeah, I suppose it's quite a while now, and he's obviously been to the likes of Dundalk and Galway since, so it's cooled a little bit there, and I think Shane is just a decent kind of fella. Like, you see his appearances on the likes of Off the Ball and stuff like that. He's a man who knows the game. He's got those European links. He's definitely on for bigger and better things, and I think you do have to accept that. Listen, the man was probably bigger than Wexford for a while there, and there was a bit of some animosity, I suppose, is probably the best way to put it, about him leaving. But I think you kind of have to focus on the likes of Ian Ryan and the next generation coming through, and you can't worry too much about that 2015 team, as much as it was brilliant, and I was absolutely delighted to be part of it as well. But hopefully we can see him having a great opportunity in Limerick, and maybe we might be able to sign some of those youngsters coming through, because that's very much Ian Ryan's mantra in the transfer market, is getting these young players in and making them stars.
Yeah, certainly, and I do hope that Wexford have a better season than they've endured in the last few seasons. But you did mention about, we'll say, support, and I know that, look, bandwagon support is just needed, particularly for the League of Ireland. Like when the team is doing well, you'll get the support. Because I did notice that the Wexford support, even sometimes maybe a few years ago when they got a couple of results, wasn't particularly good. So it looks like it's going to need a really consistent kind of, run of results to get that support. But you did say there that maybe there's a bit more optimism around it and people that are willing to go to the games and give this a chance under Ian Ryan this season.
Yeah, I think so. I think Ian speaks very well, and he speaks, he's not too negative. And I think that was the one thing with Brian O'Sullivan last year, was that sometimes even when you were on the sidelines, you were looking at some of the Wexford performers, and they were kind of rowing with each other, and they weren't really all pulling in the same direction. Ian is somebody who has just come down and said, listen, I'm ready to work with everybody. He spoke to a lot of the junior clubs down here, and that's a lot of the reason why the Wexford public doesn't get behind the team, is that they're very much still interested in their own junior clubs. And the likes of Northend United are doing really well in the FAI Junior Cup, and you've got Moyne Rangers and Shamrock Rovers and teams like that. So if he can get some of those guys on board, and I think he has, he's put out an olive branch and said, listen, we're happy enough to help develop your guys, and if we can help out in any way that we can, we'll do that. And I think that's a really smart move, and I think it's starting to pay a bit of dividends now with those younger players that are coming in. And the one thing you want to see as a Wexford fan is more Wexford players on the team, and I think that's why the Aaron Dobbs signing is really shrewd. Not only is he somebody who's proven at this level and knows what it takes to play and win in Ferrycarrig Park, he's also a young enough lad. He's a local lad as well, and if we can see the likes of Evan Farrell maybe getting a few more starts, he got his first goal in that game against Bray, last game of last season. So if he can start to progress a bit more, you've got the likes of Tyler Dunphy and a young lad called Caleb Harness. He was only 15 last year, so I think he might still need a few more years to come in. But these are Wexford players that are going to hopefully one day play for the Wexford team, and that makes such a difference, particularly when you get to this level, that if you can cheer on the local boys, then plenty more people will come down and support your team.
Yeah, it certainly will be interesting. The whole season will be interesting, but Friday night in particular will be interesting as well. I know I predicted a draw for myself. If you were to go for a prediction, Ed, what do you think will happen?
Tracy specialise in the 1-1 draws, and I think that would probably be a decent enough result for both teams to get away with. But let's be positive here and say Denny Corcoran gets a winning goal maybe in the 70th minute and Wexford win 2-1.
Oh yeah, I think the hurling has rubbed off on you a bit. I think you're becoming overconfident.
We have a bit of a swagger down here now. We're looking for a double.
Absolutely. We shall see what happens on Friday evening, and we're delighted to be joined once again by Aidan Delaney. It was great chatting to you, and obviously we wish your club Wexford the best luck as long as they finish below treaty for the.
Well, we might end up playing each other in the playoffs. You never know.
You never know.